Chapter 11, Keep Your Chin Up. Shark! I looked through the tank. It was like watching a television that had way too much blue in the picture. But the show was definitely an action comedy. Mookie was running around in front of the tank, waving his arms in terror and screaming, "Help! Shark!" The guy dropped the bucket and ran toward him. Mookie kept screaming as he raced into the next room. The guy chased after him. "Knock that off, kid!" I jumped into my clothes and went back through the door. "Got it," Abigail said. "Yup. We'd better leave. We can meet Mookie in the parking lot." "Good idea." We went outside and I handed her the bag. "Great. That's plenty. Now we just have to mix it with the other ingredients and let it sit." "Sit? How long?" I'd figured she'd whip up some kind of formula right away. "I'm not sure. At least overnight. I have to extract the collagen fibrils from the calcium salts." "We need to hurry. Can you do it faster?" I could almost feel death creeping down my legs. "You'll be fine," Abigail said. "And don't come back until you learn how to behave." I looked over at the door where Mookie was being ejected from the aquarium. "Thanks," I said when he joined us. "You really saved me. I owe you one." "Just keep that in mind when you become mindless and get an urge to eat brains." "I'm not going to eat brains," I shouted. "I've got 2 kidneys," Mookie said. "I guess you could have one of those, but not my liver. I'm pretty sure I only have one. You probably wouldn't want it anyhow. I'll bet even zombies don't eat liver." I stopped listening. When Mrs. Goldberg picked us up, she had even more stuff crammed in the van. I guess she went to the recycling center for the opposite reason that most people do. We wedged ourselves and rode back to town. "Thanks for the ride," I said to Mrs. Goldberg as she pulled into our house. I'll get right to work on our science project." Abigail gave me a wink to let me know what she meant was the cure. "We have a science project?" Mookie screamed. "Nobody told me. When's it due?" I pushed him out of the van. "He's such a kidder," I said to Mrs. Goldberg. I got out and waved as I drove off. "It's great that Abigail's helping you," Mookie said after I explained to him that he wasn't about to flunk science. "Yeah, I just wish I didn't have to wait for the cure. My parents are going to get suspicious if I don't eat dinner. I could see my mom dragging me to all sorts of doctors." "That's no problem," Mookie said. "Just do what I do when my mom makes macaroni with clams and cheese. I push my food around and pretend I'm chewing something. The real trick is that I squish everything to one side so half the plate is empty. She never notices that I don't put anything in my mouth." That's not a bad idea. I think I'll give that a try. Sure enough, I was able to get through dinner without actually eating. Since Mom had made fish cakes, I was especially happy that I didn't have to put anything in my mouth. Once again, I couldn't fall asleep. It looked like being awake was part of being dead, which was weird since people are always comparing death to sleep. I went down to the computer and played the zombie game. This time, I put it on the hardest setting. No problem. I guess I had a couple things going for me. I never got nervous, no matter how exciting or intense the action got. My hands were always steady, and I never blinked. I was a perfect game-playing machine, but I had only one sample level of the game, and I was getting tired of beating it. I searched around for other game samples. There were plenty. If nothing else, it looked like I wouldn't be bored at night. I used Mookie's trick at breakfast. It worked just as well as it had at dinner. Waffles are really easy to smush together to make them look like they take up less space on the plate. "I'm glad you have your appetite back," Mom said as I put my knife and fork through the motions. I was glad I wouldn't have to choke down the waffle and return to the parallel bars. After I had dumped the food from my plate into the garbage, I grabbed my backpack and headed out. I raced up to Abigail as soon as I spotted her coming down the sidewalk toward the schoolyard. "Got it?" I asked. She gave me a funny look. "Wait, what's wrong?" "The process is slower than I expected. How much farther has the deadness moved?" she asked. I pulled up my pant legs and showed her the latest mark halfway down my shin. "That's not bad. We still have time. I did some more research. We need another ingredient, but it won't be hard to find." "Oh, that's just great. What do we need? A rare bird that lives in the Arctic?" "A mushroom but nothing rare. I'm pretty sure the ones we need grow in Ackerman's woods. We can go there right after school. You didn't say anything about a mushroom yesterday. This process is extremely complicated. It's so near the far edge of science that it's almost like some kind of magic. Not that I believe in magic. I didn't want to hear about science or magic. Abigail, I'm trusting you with my life or my death or something like that. Don't worry, Nathan, she said. I won't let you down. As if there wasn't enough stress in my life, today was field day. We were about to spend the entire day competing against the kids from Perrin Hall Academy. When we got to the field, I saw Mort Ivinson on crutches. What happened? I asked. I heard he tripped on the steps yesterday, Mookie said. That's bad. He was our best hope. At least we still have Tammy, Mookie pointed at the track. She's as fast as Mort. Tammy Andrews was jogging warm-up laps. Rodney jogged up next to her. Then Rodney stumbled. He and Tammy went down in a tangle. Rodney sprang right up, but Tammy, she stayed on the ground, clutching her knee. I watched Rodney closely while people ran over to help. He looked happy. I guess he's decided to improve his chances of winning. I wondered whether he'd given Mort a push too. We'll never beat Perrin Hall now, Mookie said. At least I won't get blamed for the loss. I checked in the list and saw that Mookie and I were both scheduled for broad jump first. Dead or alive, I was pretty bad at jumping. We went over and got in line. There was only 3 kids ahead of us, so it wasn't a long wait. As I ran towards the pit at my first attempt, I realized I didn't have any nervous twinges. I was always afraid I'd hurt myself if I jumped too far. Right now, my gut could care less at the rest of my body did. I can't get hurt. That thought helped me launch into the air. It was a magnificent leap, just like those track stars do in the Olympics. I flew further than I'd ever jumped before. I was half kid, half cat. But my first thought was followed mid-jump by a dark one. I can still break something. All my gracefulness vanished. I clutched at the air and tried to slow myself down. That didn't work. I lost my balance and toppled. Safe! Mookie shouted, waving his arms like a third base umpire as I landed flat on my stomach. Very funny, as I said, and spat out sawdust. I took it easy in the high jump. Then, when my turn came, I lined up for the mile. Rodney was next to me. At least I didn't have to worry about him tripping me. I wasn't any threat to him. By the end of my first lap, I was in last place. But then I started to gain on everyone. At the end of the next lap, I was in the middle of the pack. By the third lap, I was right behind the leaders. I wasn't any faster than before, but I wasn't out of breath. I didn't need to slow down. My speed wasn't great for the first lap, but it really wasn't good for the last one, when everyone else was running out of air. The track seemed to glide beneath my feet. I found my rhythm and sailed through the final stretch. I almost didn't want to stop as I crossed the finish line. I never knew that running could be so fun. A girl from Perrin Hall came in first, but I took second, right ahead of a boy and another girl from Perrin. Rodney actually managed 5th place. He picked up a lot more points in the weightlifting events and moved into the top 4. It didn't help. Perrin Hall was killing us on team points. Mr. Lomax wasn't even watching anymore. He was slumped on the bleachers with his head in his hands. We were so far behind, it was pretty much hopeless by the time I got to my last event. I jumped up, grabbed the bar, and did my first chin-up. Mookie grabbed the bar right next to me. What's the point, I thought. So what if you could run faster than anyone else or jump higher? It didn't make you a better person. It sure didn't mean that everyone would treat you special or different, but everyone would go all wild over the winners. I glanced at Mookie. He was slowing down. I wasn't surprised that I was lasting longer. I was a lot lighter. Mookie hung from the bar. His face grew red and then became a scary darker shade, and then somewhere between purple and blue. He groaned like someone was moving his appendix with a fork. Finally, he dropped and landed with a oof. One of the teachers, Mrs. Bierce, was counting for him, looked at the counter in his hand, and then said, 3. 3? Mookie asked. I'm sure I did at least 10. 3, Mr. Bryce said. And the last one was a gift. You barely got your forehead past the bar. Oh, well, it's still a new record for me. Mookie flexed in his muscles and wandered over next to my counter, Mrs. Nurmi. I kept going. I expected the whole day to be a nightmare, but my living nightmare actually made field day a lot more fun. Not that I trade my normal life for my new abilities. I was dying to find that mushroom so Abigail could finish the cure. Psst. I looked down at Mookie. He was trying to get my attention, but I wasn't sure why. He pointed at the counter in Mrs. Nurmi's hand, then mouthed some words. I had no idea what he was trying to tell me. I shrugged, which isn't easy when you're hanging from a bar. 239, Mookie said. Oh gosh, I froze in the middle of what was about to become my 240th chin-up. I hadn't realized I'd done so many. My arms weren't even tired at all. I dangled from the bar and looked around. Everyone was watching me, including Rodney. He didn't look happy. I had to stop. I started to pull myself up again, groaned, thrashed my legs, twisted violently, and then let go. I heard a snap as I fell from the bar. I dropped to my knees and gasped like I was exhausted. As I got back to my feet, Mookie whispered, "Nice acting." He gave me a thumbs up. "Thanks." I held up my thumb. It wobbled, then flopped over. I stared at the horror for a moment, then straightened it out. I flexed it, and it seemed to work okay. 239, Mrs. Nurmi said. My word, what an impressive performance, young man. You've obviously been training very hard. She went over to the big score sheet, taped to the back of the wall of the school, and gave my count to the kids keeping track of the results. I moved closer so I could read my total. The next highest chin-up I saw was 47, and the highest placed kid had 534 total points. Oh boy, I'd earned 478 points just for the chin-ups. Added to my other totals, that put me at 822, and it put Belgosi ahead of Perrin Hall. As I was staring at the score, Mr. Lomax came over. I expected him to accuse me of cheating or maybe leaving undigested food on the gym floor. Instead, he smiled, patted me on my shoulder, and said, "Nice job, Abercrombie. I knew you'd come through if I gave you a push." Thanks. I was so startled, I said it about a minute after he'd walked away. Wow, his veins pop when he's happy too. Mookie said, "Looks like you're gonna be a captain." That's the last thing I care about. How do you know? Mookie asked. I have no idea. Muscle fatigue occurs from depletion of anaerobic energy sources, Abigail said as she walked up to us. Living muscles get tired after a certain amount of exertion. It looks like dead muscles don't. There were probably all sorts of things you can do that a normal person can't. It's a shame we won't be able to explore all of these possibilities. It would be fascinating to run some experiments. Yeah, I'm really sorry I can't stay dead for longer, I told her. Maybe you can find another victim after you're done with me. They called me over to the award ceremony. It was unreal. They even had a platform in front of the bleachers like the Olympics. I stood at the top. Our whole school cheered except for one person. Rodney glared at me and punched his palm. But the second besters and the doomed went wild. Everyone started chanting, "Nathan, Nathan." Shauna, Lexi, Talissa, Becca, and Cindy were clapping and bouncing. As much as I was eager to go to the woods and get the rest of the cure,